February 7th saw the worldwide release of Birds of Prey, the Harley Quinn-centric follow-up to Suicide Squad. Despite being embargoed right up until the first public screenings, professional critics loved it. And after starting out higher, the movie appears to have settled at a solid fresh rating of 80% at Rotten Tomatoes. Yet somehow, the audience stayed away in droves. Industry trackers estimated in advance that the movie would open in about the 50 million vicinity, which itself is significantly lower than Suicide Squad's 130 million opening, and in the same range as Shazam, which was widely considered as a disappointment. As it turned out though, Birds of Prey fell 20 million short of even that, opening to just 33 million domestically, and a worldwide total of about 81 million. That's bad, because the movie has nowhere of note left to open, so it's all downhill from here. So what happened? What will this performance mean for the future of Harley Quinn and the DC Extended Universe? In this post-mortem, I will give you my take on just that, by first putting these numbers into context, exploring the movie's development and where it all went wrong, and what the future might hold after this. If you like the content of this video, and other we do like it, then leave a like and subscribe, and in the process, make sure to indicate that you want notifications on all videos. We'd also greatly appreciate if existing subscribers will take a moment to check that you are indeed still subscribed, and that you too get notifications on all videos. And with that out of the way, let's dive in. Since the movie has a listed production budget of around 97 million that they will admit to, opening to 33 million at the domestic box office isn't a flat-out disaster. But there is no way to put a positive spin on it. None. Shazam was considered a disappointment for DC, and even that opened 20 million higher. That makes Birds of Prey the lowest opener in the entire DC Extended Universe by a wide margin. In fact, you'd have to go a decade back in time, to the year 2010 and Jonah Hex, to find a DC movie which opened even lower. While that is a disappointing opening to be sure, it is too early to call the movie a flop just yet, as it still might have staying power and do a slow crawl towards at the very least breaking even. The profits the studio and its investors no doubt were hoping for will not be forthcoming, but they can still avoid heavy losses. Right now, the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is about as high as the critic score, so if we can trust that score to be legitimate, you'd expect the movie to have good legs and hold up well in the upcoming weeks. It will be interesting to see how it actually holds up. The movie opened in nearly every other territory it's going to open in internationally this weekend as well, and it's still only open to about 80 million worldwide. By a funny coincidence, the worldwide gross at this point is about the same as the listed production budget, that they will admit to anyway. But don't think for a moment that means the movie has already broken even or that it is about to. Both the theaters exhibiting the movie and various tax departments around the world sees a good chunk of that gross. So the rule of thumb is that the worldwide gross has to at least double the listed production budget in order for the studio to be left with enough to cover their expenditure. That aside, a worldwide opening like that shows that there simply wasn't that much interest in or demand for this movie, anywhere really. Without a staggered release and nowhere of note left to open, this is as good as it's going to get. Making matters worse, audiences in Asia in particular aren't going to go out to theaters much these days, seeing as they're worried about being infected with the plague version 2.0, or the coronavirus, as it is more commonly referred to as. That is an external circumstance the studio had no sway over, yet they will still be affected by it. Let's chalk it up to Murphy's Law. Even so, none of this alters the fact that the spin-off featuring the breakout star of Suicide Squad opened to 100 million less than Suicide Squad at the domestic box office. That being the case, even in the best of scenarios, Birds of Prey is unlikely to crawl to the 100 million mark domestically. It would appear that for all the virtues it might have, Birds of Prey wasn't the right movie to make. So how did it end up getting made? Despite some meddling reviews at the time of release, because it, sucked to high heavens, Suicide Squad actually did pretty well in theaters, grossing $746 million worldwide. The breakout star in it was Harley Quinn, and Warner had a hunch this would be the case long before the movie was even released. Rather than a Suicide Squad sequel, which wouldn't become a thing until James Gunn made it clear he wanted to do one. Then DC head honchos Jeff Johns and Peter Berg decided to move forward with a Harley Quinn-centric follow-up movie that would go heavy on the girl power. Development started on their watch. Remember, this was back in 2016. Deadpool had just blown everyone away, so that obviously went in there, but it was Paul Feig's Ghostbusters that had become a rallying cry for the industry, which at this time went all in on quote-unquote woke projects across the board. Many of the movies that now have come out and bombed came to be at this time, when overtly putting down all men was all the rage. This seeped into the Harley Quinn spin-off movie as well. Several different concepts were being developed, including a Joker and Harley Quinn movie, but what they landed on was Birds of Prey. Star Margot Robbie herself, acting as a producer, had a big role in that decision. She told Collider, "I pitched the idea of an R-rated girl gang film including Harley, because I was like, Harley needs friends. Harley loves interacting with people, so don't ever make her do a standalone film. She's got to be with other people, it should be a girl gang. I wasn't seeing enough girl gangs on screen, especially in the action space, so that was always a big part of it." Development had started under Johns and Berg, but in the aftermath of Justice League, which they were blamed for, they were ousted. That did throw a wrench into the proceedings, but development continued, and the movie was eventually greenlit by Walter Hamada, who set it up for release after Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine that Hamada did it that way so Birds of Prey, the on paper safer choice of the two, would come out in the same release spot as Deadpool and make everything okay again, in case Joker flopped. Oh, the irony. After the green light had been given, things came together, and without any serious issues or used condoms making the rounds, Jared Leto style. The first cut of the movie tested pretty poorly though, so Walter Hamada mandated reshoots, and who knows how much they added to the movie's total cost. The reshoots fixed the movie though, and led to what is now in theaters. But on the way to theaters, mistakes were made. This movie was conceived in the aftermath of Deadpool, which you can clearly tell from its choice of narrative style. Like Deadpool, it also opened around Valentine's Day, and it sported an R rating. However, unlike Deadpool, among Harley Quinn's key demographics are young girls who aren't necessarily old enough to see R-rated movies by themselves. As a general thing, you will never find me objecting to an R rating, but in this one particular case, it might have been a strategic mistake. Because now older audiences would have to make up for a very real shortfall. Despite the success of the standalone Joker, the main line of DC Extended Universe movies remains a hot mess, and one of the arguably worst movies in it, if not the worst, was Suicide Squad. Many went to see it, but I don't think that many actually liked it. Even if many may have liked Harley Quinn in it, Suicide Squad was still a mess despite her presence, and not as many as the studio counted on may have wanted to revisit that world, especially in light of the way it was marketed. The movie was always going to have a feminist slant. For instance, Margot Robbie famously hated Harley Quinn's hot pants in Suicide Squad, so in Birds of Prey, she would be wearing something more empowering. But feminism is a washed-out term. It can mean anything from wanting equality between genders, to turning the tables on perceived historic oppression and invoking outright misandry to that end. In October of 2019, 4 months before the movie's eventual release, Ewan McGregor, who co-stars as the movie's Trump-inspired villain Black Mask, made it blatantly clear that Birds of Prey would take the latter course of action. He told Premiere that there is in the script a real look on misogyny, and I think we need that. We need to be more aware of how we behave with the opposite sex. We need to be taught to change. Misogynists in movies are often extreme. They rape, they beat women, and it is legitimate to represent people like that because they exist, and they're obviously the worst. But in the Birds of Prey dialogue, there is always a hint of everyday misogyny, of those things you say as a man you do not even realize, mansplaining, and it's in the script in a very subtle way. I found that brilliant. That is code for that every single male character in the movie will be portrayed as an over-the-top woman-hating misogynist that is either evil, inept, or incompetent, or all of the above. Here, I would like to stress that chances are McGregor is merely parroting talking points that have been fed to him by the studio, so don't hold these statements against him too much personally. This whole interview and everything about it was arranged by the movie's marketing campaign, and after this, I think we'll see fewer marketing campaigns head down this particular path. But remember, this movie is a product of its time, and by that I mean the time it was developed, not the time it was released, for times do indeed change fast these days. At the time when this movie was being developed, and when the marketing campaign was planned for that matter, Terminator Dark Fate and Charlie's Angels had yet to flop. Dave Chappelle had yet to start the trend of celebrities canceling cancel culture, and Gillette had yet to back down from their campaign of telling their customer base how horrible they were and how much they needed to do better. Because Gillette did not yet know that doing so was costing them $8 billion. By the time Birds of Prey was released, however, all of those had transpired. Audiences had had their fill with and started turning their backs on productions with an ideological slant like the one we see here. There are indications that the pendulum might have started swinging the other direction, and Birds of Prey was just a little bit too late to the woke party, although it came just in time for the coronavirus. Birds of Prey is at best an underperformer. It is such an underperformer though, that they retroactively changed the title from Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of one Harley Quinn to just Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey, hoping that will help. Time will tell if it remains merely an underperformer, or if it will sink further into flop territory, which would put yet another nail in the coffin of the DCEU as envisioned by Zack Snyder. Harley Quinn will be back in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, but with time, I think we'll find that the soft reboot DC on film is currently undergoing will gradually become a hard reboot. Other studios will also take note of this, because coming hot on the heels of Terminator Dark Fate and Charlie's Angels, Birds of Prey make out the third strike for feminist movies with a misandrist slant. It will take time before you see the results on screen, but Hollywood is starting to notice. For more on the topic of Birds of Prey, do check out our roundtable discussion featuring special guest Chen. Link is in the description. And as usual, be sure to let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments.